Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Petagna alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting. And if you couldn't notice, the boys are mobile right now. Drew out in Spartanburg, South Carolina for the Carolina Shrine Bowl. I'm in New Orleans on my way to Hattiesburg for the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star Game, one of the most underrated events in all of postseason football. Drew, a lot happening in the college football world. We'll talk a little bit about five-star Ryan Williams at Alabama commit reclassifying from 2025 to 2024, and then those flips. And we usually call it one little thing, but how about one big thing? Let's not bury the lead here. The number 2 player in all of the country per 24/7 Sports, Dylan Raiola. He's been committed to Georgia for a long time. And Kirby Smart, Steve Wilfong, our director of recruiting, he is crystal balled the number 1 quarterback in the country to Lincoln, Nebraska. Matt Rule. Drew, right now, Matt Rule and the Nebraska Cornhuskers are trending not only for Dylan Raiola, but a former 5-star as well, and Kyle McCord from the Ohio State Buckeyes. A lot to unpack here. Drew, your thoughts if Nebraska ends up landing Dylan Raiola?
Well, Cooper, didn't you tell me, 6 months ago that Dylan Raiola is going to play a snap for the Cornhuskers at some point? I don't think you thought it would be potentially in 2024, but this is a big news. This is huge. And I was on CBS Sports HQ, and I brought up the fact that, Nebraska needs to improve the passing game. It was one of the worst, not only at the Power 5 level, but also at the FBS level, 129th in passing O here in 2023. And Dylan Raiola, if they were able to get him, you would have to be excited about the direction Matt Rule has the program headed. Look, when he took over, we said this wasn't going to be a 1 or 2 year rebuild. This was going to be a 4, 5, 6 rebuild. And to me, if they're able to get Dylan Raiola pull off that flip, and it sounds like it's heading in that direction, a few reports out there that he's going to spend this upcoming weekend in Lincoln on an official visit, I think this is a battle cry for the Nebraska fan base. You want to talk about NIL support. You get a legacy prospect, one of the best passers in the 2024 cycle, not only the 2024 cycle, one of the best passers in recent years signed. I think that a lot of people are going to buy into Nebraska football. So I'm interested to see what happens here. You mentioned Kyle McCord as well. I think that gives them a intermediate quarterback, and then the long-term plan in Dylan Raiola. And when I look at Nebraska, that's my question mark. What happens under center moving forward?
Georgia is still fighting here as Kirby Smart leading the charge to keep Dylan Raiola in the boat. Why wouldn't they? Georgia, 2-quarterback class. Ryan Puglisi also in the top 247, notable for Georgia. Drew, there's been some reports about Carson Beck. This is what has really supposedly impacted Dylan Raiola in terms of the 11th hour potential flip to Nebraska, that Carson Beck coming back for another year. Dylan Raiola would have to sit a year in Athens, but it looks like it's going to be that way in Lincoln as well if Nebraska can land Kyle McCord. Pretty interesting. The other thing to think about here, if you're wondering how Nebraska is firmly in the mix, if you've been living under a rock, Dylan Raiola's father was an All-American at Nebraska, also played 10 years in the NFL for the Detroit Lions, very respected player, and then also Dylan's uncle is on staff as the offensive line coach, just signed an extension as well. Drew, on the flip side of this, if Dylan Raiola does indeed sign with Nebraska, what's your purview for Georgia fans out there who just 8 days away thought that they were going to end up with the number 1 arm in the country?
I think there's no reason to panic. I mean, if we're being completely honest, Cooper, I don't know if I said it on this podcast, maybe it was the Cover 3. I don't think the gap between Raiola, I keep doing this, Raiola and Puglisi is all that big. I think it actually shrunk here in the senior seasons. And Raiola threw 250 passes as a senior at Buford and tossed just 1 interception. So that's saying a lot about what I think about Puglisi. There's just something about him when you watch him play, specifically as a senior. Doesn't get enough credit for the runner he is. He's got a live arm, baseball background. I think the biggest thing for Puglisi, and he has a ton of supporters behind the scenes there in Athens. Cooper, I know you talked to some of the same people as me. I mean, they have been pushing Pugga for a few months now, but I think becoming more of a touch passer, but you can see it in the senior tape, just his ability to distribute the football and then also run the football. So I don't think Georgia fans should panic. We'll see what they do in the 2025 cycle. Let's assuming Raiola were to leave and they ended up with Puglisi, Julian Lewis, the #1 ranked recruit in the class of 2026. He's talked about reclassifying. He's been a regular in Athens as well. Like, I'm not concerned about the long-term outlook under center for Georgia if Dylan Raiola were to end up at Nebraska.
We talked about it, I think, a week or two ago, Matt Rule on this show talking about, hey, the cost of a college football starter, 5-star type of talent now, it's about $1 to $2 million, right? So I think that was probably a little bit of a precursor, what you're seeing play out now. Drew, the other thing I want to hit on, how fired up does it get you that Dylan Raiola could potentially be throwing the football to the likes of guys like Malachi Coleman and Carter Nelson?
Yeah, I mean, I get excited. I mean, we said it, right? Matt Rule, when he took over in Nebraska, he's going to recruit a ton of different traits, and it might not be the highest ranked individuals, but these are guys that have NFL tools, and we saw that in his stops at Temple and at Baylor. But it wasn't going to be a 1 or 2 year thing. It was going to be a bit of a longer burn. And Malachi Coleman, you mentioned him, a guy on my freaks list in the 2023 cycle. We had him, as a freshman of the week at some point there back in October when he caught that touchdown against Northwestern. I feel good about the direction the roster would be headed. And I think for Matt Rule heading into year 2 after a disappointing year 1, to get what would be the highest ranked signee in the modern recruiting era for the Nebraska, that's going to, ease everyone a little bit and not buy him time, but get everyone on board. So yeah, I'd be fired up about those two freaks if I was Dylan Raiola. I mean, some guys to throw to in Carter Nelson and Malachi Coleman.
Foundational piece for Nebraska. The Cornhuskers right now, they rank number 22 per 24/7 Sports in the composite team rankings. With the addition of 5-star Dylan Raiola, if that does happen, they would move up into the top 20 at the number 19 spot. The Dylan Raiola sweepstakes, we will be following that closely. Our director of recruiting, Steve Wilfong, will have everything you need to know there. And 24/7 Sports in general, your home for everything recruiting, transfer portal as well. And make sure to follow the Oyster Boys on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. You can find us every Tuesday and Wednesday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And for those of you who like to listen in podcast form wherever you find your podcasts as well. As I mentioned earlier, both Andrew and I are on the road, so I got to give a shout out. You're probably wondering about the backdrop right now. My nephew Pete hooking it up. Love that. Prestige Worldwide. That's what we're doing. And a lot to talk about. Drew, you're in Spartanburg, South Carolina right now, and you're there to see the Carolina Shrine Bowl. So a couple takeaways. We're going to talk about a couple guys that really kind of highlighted your article yesterday in the first day of practice. Let's start with Tennessee receiver commit and top 247 receiver, Braylon Staley. What'd you like about him?
Well, Coop, we continue to hammer this down. With the 2024 cycle, it is loaded at pass catchers, more specifically so with the wide receivers. I mean, coast to coast. So I show up here in Spartanburg, the hub city, and I thought the best guy day one was Braylon Staley, who really hasn't been discussed on a national level. This guy had a monster senior season, 69 catches, 1,100 yards, 14 touchdowns. State champ in the triple jump, state champ in the 200. He caught more passes than anyone on Monday during the South Carolina practices. I mean, he was giving DBs fits, and he can track the football deep. Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks actually kind of made a late run at Staley, but it sounds like he is sticking with Tennessee. He told me he's going to go through Cheez-It Bowl practices here next week before he participates in the Under Armour All-America game. And Coop, my biggest takeaway with Braylon Staley is he is the perfect fit for Josh Heupel's offense. Kind of a clone of Squirrel White. He can create explosive plays. You can throw a swing pass to him. He can go get it deep over the middle, run a go route. He can do a little bit of everything, and I'm fired up to see him in Knoxville because I think, again, he can be a high-volume target in an up-tempo offense. So he was awesome, and a guy that really has flown a little bit under the radar. It sounds weird to say that about a top 247 wide receiver, but when there's so many of these dudes, you kind of forget about some of them. So Braylon Staley reintroducing himself, and I'm sure he's going to have a big game on Saturday, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's a top performer there in Orlando at the Under Armour All-America game in a few weeks.
second straight cycle the Vols have gone to Carolina. Nathan Leacock, Drew, is another guy that kind of rose up late for us in the top 247 last year. That's a big win for them to go to South Carolina, dig out a guy like Braylon Staley. Drew, another guy, a big body out of the Carolinas, and it seems like the Georgia Bulldogs, they just continue to mine for these type of dudes. How about Nnamdi Igboko, a big mass mover is what you would call a guy like that. What'd you like from him yesterday?
We talk so much about what Georgia has done on the offensive line this cycle, and for good reason. I mean, the group's all over 6'5", averages about 345 pounds when they step on the scales. But Nnamdi is a massive, wide individual on the defensive side of the ball, and I think he's the perfect fit for what Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart want to do on defense. Glenn Schumann as well. I mean, this guy can eat up space. He was a bit of an issue for North Carolina on Monday. They couldn't practice when he was on. Interesting, unique background. He actually plays some basketball. He's got a brother in the 2026 class as well that I know Georgia is high on. But my takeaway here, Georgia, they are hoarding mass not only on offense, but they're doing it on defense as well. I think this guy, you might not see him year one, year two, but he has a chance to be a key piece in the middle for the Bulldogs. Play that shade, zero tech, one tech. He is, Cooper, like the widest individual in this class. He's got tree trunks for legs down there. And, I thought it was a really notable performance from him and someone Georgia fans should be fired up about. Everyone wants to talk about the top ranked guys in that number one ranked recruiting class, but there are some dudes, if you dig down, scroll down that list and look at the bottom of it for UGA.
A lot of puppies on that defensive line, too. I mean, you think about Jordan Hall, got to play a little bit this past season in Athens. Guys like Jamal Jarrett as well. I'm sure we'll see over the next couple of years. You throw in a guy like Igboko as well. Georgia not going anywhere on that defensive front. Let's stick with the point of attack on the other side of the football. We talked about South Carolina a little bit earlier, but this one, a little bit more positive news. Josiah Thompson, a guy that we have ranked inside the top 50 in the top 247 this cycle. Drew, you texted me and said he kind of reminds me of David Sanders. If you don't know who David Sanders is, it's one of the best players in the country in 2025, the number one ranked offensive tackle. Drew, it's not a tackle-heavy year. Only two of those guys inside the top 32. This is one of those guys that I think we're going to want to keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely, Cooper. I mean, he's listed at 280 pounds. I think that is a little generous. I would probably say he's closer to 250 than he is 300. He is lean, but he's got that prototypical frame, very light on his feet, can move in the pass sets. We didn't get any one-on-ones out here, and I was at practice Tuesday morning as well. They're just not doing one-on-ones, but from what I saw, inside run, 11 on 11, I mean, Josiah Thompson, he was the best looking of the bunch, and that's not surprising. He is the highest ranked prospect here in Spartanburg. And Cooper, what I think is really notable is the fact that South Carolina is going to get Josiah Thompson, because we know they need to improve that offensive line, and it looks like they're trying to do it through the high school ranks. Here in 2023, they played two true freshmen up front, Tree Babalade, Trovon Baugh. And now they got Josiah Thompson coming, who I think can be a left tackle in the SEC. Now, he's going to need probably a year or two to add some mass, notably in that lower half. But I think if you are a South Carolina fan, you got to be fired up about what that offensive line could be at some point down the line, just given the developmental upside. Shane Beamer is elevating the floor and the ceiling of that O-line room. And they also got Cam Pringle here, who has looked good for the South Carolina squad as a right and left tackle. So big takeaway, South Carolina, they got some young, promising talent on the offensive line. Josiah Thompson is one of them, and I'm fired up to see him at the Under Armour All-America game, because I think there's going to be, some more premium pass rushers, and we should get one-on-ones there. But yes, I agree, a guy to keep an eye on, especially as we try to finalize these 2024 rankings.
Tough season for the Gamecocks on the field. Drew, if there is a positive from the 2023 season, is a lot of those young guys played. You mentioned Tree Babalade along with Trovon Baugh as well. Now you add in a guy like Josiah Thompson. The future looking bright there in South Carolina. They got to get it right on the field. How about this? Hosting A.J. Swan, the former Vandy quarterback, will be on a visit coming up here soon for the Gamecocks as they look to backfill Spencer Rattler as he's off to the NFL. All right, Drew, we have talked more about NC State and their receiving core than I ever expected when we started this podcast. But how about Kevin Concepcion, a darling not only of PFF and everybody out there voting for freshman All-American teams, but of the Oyster Boys as well, a guy that we really kind of pointed to in the preseason as a guy to look out for. That all came to fruition in 2023, the ACC Offensive Freshman of the Year. And Drew, they might not be done. You like a couple of the guys that you've seen out there this week as well.
Yeah, we might need to have Joker Phillips as our wide receivers coach on this imaginary Oyster Boys staff, because he is reloading there at the position. You got 3 wide receivers, and I put those in quotation marks out here. Jonathan Paylor, he's playing wide receiver this week for the North Carolina squad after running for 2,000 yards as a senior. I think he's more of a running back than he is a wideout, but you can use him in the slot. He kind of reminds me of Naheem Hines, who the Wolfpack had a few years ago. He's a stud. I think he's the best player on North Carolina's roster. Chunk play machine. I think he's going to be able to do just that, and I'm a fan of him. But I also like Jamar Boston, Christian Zachary, 2 more guys that are representing the state of North Carolina this week at the Shrine Bowl. And to me, Cooper, you take those 3, you pair them with Terrell Anderson. We've talked about on this show and podcast before. We're big fans of Terrell Anderson, huge riser in the 24/7 sports rankings. NC State fighting to hold on to him as Georgia looks for a flip. I think the name of the game here for Joker Phillips is he is getting a bunch of diverse bodies and different skill sets to reload at the wide receiver position. So that's 4 guys, and you pair them with Kevin Concepcion. Stock up, arrow up for the future of NC State's wide receiver room. And then toss in the fact, hey, Cedric Bailey, who just won a state title down in Florida, he could be the guy throwing the football to these individuals. So I am buying stock in the future of NC State's offense. I think it could be fun. I think it could be explosive. And I think they have a chance to throw it around the yard because they got guys of all different sizes that can do a little bit of everything. So, again, buying stock in NC State and Joker Phillips.
The most consistent program under Dave Doran that nobody talks about, right? And they just continue to kind of do what they do. They do a great job in the Carolinas. Shout out Joker Phillips. Had a cup of coffee with him at Cincinnati. All right, Drew's got us locked in Spartanburg. I will be in Hattiesburg tonight covering Alabama, Mississippi. That is a loaded event. We'll touch on that in a second. I mentioned every Tuesday and Wednesday you can find the Oyster Boys. How about Monday and Thursday? 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Emily Proud holding it down on the college football recruiting show. Everything you need. Smoke Dixon, Carl Reed, all our experts at 24/7 Sports doing a great job as recruiting heating up and coming to an end at the end of 2023. All right, Drew, let's get into the transaction wire. And I mentioned Alabama, Mississippi. Let's start with the guy, Ryan Williams, a 5-star #1 receiver in the class of 2025. Drew, he is reclassifying, and he is not going to sign in December. He's going to sign in February. He's got a couple of official visits, even outside of Alabama, coming up as well. But Drew, just how dynamic this guy is. He is a number 14 overall prospect now in the class of 2024. That's after jumping from 2025. And if you're looking for a comp for this guy, I've been thinking about it all morning. I was watching his tape on the plane, and I saw a little bit of Deshaun Jackson. I saw a little bit of DeVonta Smith. And this is a guy that just kind of glides on water when you watch him run. He makes it look so effortless with his top end speed, his ability to change gears. So smooth in the production at Saraland there with KJ Lacey, the Texas quarterback commit. Those guys really fun to watch. He's expected to be in the Under Armour All-American game later this month. And we just got news from our guy Christian Clemente, who covers the Auburn site, that he will also participate in the Alabama-Mississippi game this week. So you talk about relevancy. For Ryan Williams, if 14 wasn't good enough, he's got a chance to showcase and potentially move up a loaded receiver board in 2024. So a lot going on. Breaking down the player, he reclassifies. Drew, Alabama fighting for dear life to hold on to Ryan Williams, and for good reason. So, Drew, your takeaway not only on the player, but what could potentially happen with Ryan Williams as he's going to put off that signature until February?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen with the recruitment. I think it could get wild here. I think if the executives at 24/7 Sports and at all the other recruiting sites are fired up that this guy's going to be on the market in January and February, because it's going to give us something to talk about outside the transfer portal. But the reclassification, I'm sure a ton of people have questions about that. You know, we did the study, the story back in October about how this is becoming a trend, and the results over the years haven't really been all that promising in terms of guys panning out after they jump up a cycle. we settled on number 14 for Ryan Williams because we believe in him. And more importantly, he's already played a ton of football there at Saraland, 39 career varsity games, over 4,400 total yards of offense, 50 plus touchdowns. I think the number is 70 or something like that, averaging north of 14 yards per touch. I mean, this guy can do it. We've seen him on the camp circuit. We've seen him get it done in track and field. He's won a few bronze medals over the years. I mean, to me, Coop, I think you feel the same way. We don't really have a ton of question marks about Ryan Williams, and that's why we feel comfortable slotting him in there. Maybe compared to some of these other prospects in the past. I'm fired up that you're going to get an evaluation of him tonight. We're also going to see him in Orlando. And I think the real debate, if you really want to peel it back here, is, all right, who's the number one wide receiver in the Yellowhammer State? Is it Ryan Williams or is it Cam Coleman? And both of those guys went off in the state title games there. Where they play? Was it at Jordan Hare or was it at Bryant Denny? I can't remember.
At Bryant Denny. Bryant Denny. And the other thing is, Drew, I mean, you're talking about Cam Coleman, top 10 player in the country, the number 8 player overall, number 3 receiver, not to mention Ryan Williams, who we just talked about. And how about Perry Thompson as well? 2 of the 3 guys Auburn commits. Auburn's still working hard on Ryan Williams as well. We talked about the weapons in the Alabama-Mississippi game, but about the weapons down in Starkville, Jeff Levy, nice little transition there. Mississippi State getting going on the recruiting trail. Drew, a guy that you're very familiar with. I want to start with the quarterback position. Let's start with Michael Van Buren as well. This is a guy that was formerly committed to Oregon. He backs off that commitment out of St. Francis in the DMV. Now committed to Jeff Levy, late take in the cycle for this SEC West program and a first-year head coach. I'm pretty interested to get your thoughts. What do you think about Michael Van Buren of Starkville?
Kind of a head scratcher for me. I didn't think this is the direction Levy would go, just given maybe some of the names that are on the board. And Michael Van Buren is a guy, I think the first line in the scouting report for me is he is battle tested. He has been at Baltimore's St. Francis Academy. He has played since he was a youngster. And St. Francis Academy here in 2023 played a national schedule, and it might be the hardest high school football schedule ever assembled. I mean, they played all around the country. They played, I think it was like 8 teams that were in one point ranked inside the top 25 for our friends over there at Max Preps. And to be blunt, the season really didn't go as planned for Michael Van Buren. He took a ton of lumps. I was there in Buford when St. Francis Academy lost that game. I saw him the following week down in Florida when they took on Chaminade Madonna. Saw him against IMG Academy, East St. Louis. It's been up and down. I think the number one thing that stands up about Van Buren, however, is the fact that he will take a hit and he's going to get up and he's going to keep throwing that football. Not the biggest individual, but he can beat you with his legs. I thought that was certainly stood out in the IMG Academy game. I mean, that is essentially a college defense. You got Ellis Robinson as one of the quarters, David Stone up front, and he was able to move the chains. So, I said this before. I'm not going to knock any Jeff Levy evaluation. I just thought maybe he would get more of a passer. But then again, Jeff Levy had Michael Hawkins, who's a dynamic runner committed when he was at Oklahoma. So interesting pickup, and I think Michael Van Buren, again, going to help them with the run game. And he can make the throws more times than not. Just needs to get more consistent and protect that football.
Up against the clock a little bit here, so you can understand the decision to move quickly. Van Buren looking to find a spot as well. So that could be a perfect marriage between Levy and Van Buren. We'll see how that works out. Drew, I mentioned 2 other guys. How about Mario Craver from Clay Chalkville, a speedster at 5'9", a guy that can do a lot of different things out of the slot, can move him around, and a guy that is so dynamic in the return game as well. I like this fit for Jeff Levy in Mississippi State. I think this is a guy that you can get on the field early. I know there's a lot of attrition on that Mississippi State roster. They're going to look for speed and they're going to value those traits. So I like the idea of putting Mario Craver in a wide open offense. I think he'll thrive there if he can stay on the field. And the other one, San Francisco McGee, another guy, verified athlete out of the state of Mississippi. We'll see him at Alabama, Mississippi. Drew, this is one that's maybe flying under the radar a little bit, but you look at the redeeming qualities, big 6'2", 6'3" frame, a guy that can win a lot of 50-50 balls. I really like these 2 gets from Mississippi State. And the more that I look at a guy like Craver and McGee, it gets me fired up about the potential of what Jeff Levy can do on the recruiting trail there in Starkville.
My thought, Cooper, these guys are going to push our boy Creed Whitmore for playing time. I might not be a fan of that, but if you're a fan of Mississippi State, you should be excited. And Craver, seen him on the 7-on-7 circuit. You hit it on the head there. Just his ability to create separation as a route runner, and I think yards after the catch. Both those guys can take those short little slants, drags, whatever you want to call it, and move the chains. And we know that's what Jeff Lebby wants to do. So Mississippi State getting it going. And I think they're aligned when it comes to the NIL. And they're going to be active in the transfer portal. And they're also, it sounds like they're going to be active in that junior college market. Also just hired Corey Bell from Florida Atlantic. He is well respected in the Miami-Dade, Broward County, Palm Beach metros. I think we could see the Bulldogs a little bit more in South Florida moving forward. It's been a while since I said that.
Mississippi State will be well represented this week in Hattiesburg. Like I said, Alabama, Mississippi, we got all the coverage right here on 24/7 Sports. All right, Drew, one more on the transaction wire. This one came across the desk this morning. Riley Leonard, he is off to Notre Dame in South Bend. So a year after Sam Hartman comes over from Wake Forest, Marcus Freeman goes back to the portal again, gets a number 17 player in the transfer portal per 24/7 Sports, and Duke starter Riley Leonard. Drew, I don't think they could have done better. This is a guy with a NFL upside. I think more day two right now. I think needs to improve as a passer. But I love his ability on the ground. I think that's probably the most overlooked thing about Riley Leonard. Big 6'4", 220-pound plus athlete. And then you think about this quarterback room, Drew. Kenny Minchie in 2023, C.J. Carr, a guy that we really like, top 50 signal caller in 2024. Not to mention the wild card, Deuce Knight, right, as well. Drew, Marcus Freeman, you and I talked about it when they hired him at Notre Dame. I think one of the things that we talked about was he was going to have to take that quarterback room and he was going to have to flip it on its head. And the way that they have balanced that in a couple of years at Notre Dame has been nothing short of impressive. I love this take in Riley Leonard, but I also love how the take of Riley Leonard sets up the future of that room as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like a bridge quarterback. I agree. Notre Dame probably couldn't have done better here. A-plus addition for them. Coop, my thought here is, man, just the quarterback market it's changed so much. It almost feels like the NFL. You can just go out and get a veteran starter as you try to groom some young pups, and those pups would be Kenny Minchie, C.J. Carr, like you said. And did you see this come across the Slack channel? Probably not, because you're traveling. Someone reached out. I guess they're going to do maybe some winners and losers in the transfer portal. He had Notre Dame as a winner. I don't know if I have them in the W column or the L column. I mean, they lose all the receivers. Yes, they've replaced some of them, but it's been interesting to just see that roster turnover there in South Bend. And I think this is going to become more and more of a thing across all of football. I mean, we're talking about 30 and 40 players, new faces every year at certain schools. And Notre Dame is certainly a lot of new bodies coming in, a lot of new bodies coming out. You can make a case that they're a winner. You can make a case that they're a loser, just depending on what you think.
I think if they were able to keep Rico Flores and Braylon James going to TCU, maybe that's something that would have happened anyway. And then you add Chris Mitchell, right, a guy that you like out of the state of Florida, along with Bo Collins coming over from Clemson, and then Riley Leonard. Drew, I love this. I love this aggressive approach from Notre Dame. It doesn't feel like traditional Notre Dame. I like the fact they're being proactive in the portal. Only time will tell. But I like what Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman are doing. They're swinging. We talked about that. You got to step in the batter's box from a national approach. That seems to be the case for Marcus Freeman in this transfer portal cycle. All right, guys, did I mention signing day? Just right around the corner, 8 days away, 24/7 Sports. We got you locked in, guys. December 20th. I'll be on set with Josh Pate. Andrew will be down there in Fort Lauderdale with Blair and Gulo, Emily Proud, and the rest of the gang. All the information that you need for college football recruiting right here on 24/7 Sports. Make sure to subscribe and to like the show on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Coverage begins at 10 a.m. Eastern time. All right, Drew, Merry Flipmas. It's that time of the year, right? We talk about it all the time. Flips, flips, flips. Well, here's a graphic of some flips. I mean, it seems like everybody's kind of following the Dylan Raiola news every day. It is a rapid changing type of headlines, but here are some things that you might have missed. Let's start at the top. How about Auburn? They're trending for the number 9 interior offensive lineman, Cohen Eccles, out of Katy, Texas. Michigan gets on the board with the flip from David Poly from USC. Miami, they flipped former Florida commit Kendall Jackson out of the state of Florida as well. And Drew, I like this one. I'm LSU boy. Tigers, they land Gabriel Relaford from Evangel Christian right up there in Shreveport. And USF, how about Golesh and the boys flipping one from Tennessee and tight end Jonathan Eccles? So, Drew, I'll line them up. You knock them down. Which one of those kind of stands out to you?
I don't know, Cooper. How about Kendall Jackson going down to Coral Gables, formerly committed to obviously Florida, right down the road from him in town? Coop, this is a guy that has a projectable frame, and he's young for his grade. He could actually be a class of 2025 recruit. Miami, I just mentioned, roster turnover. They're losing a lot of bodies, and they're active in the transfer portal, trying to find some interior defensive linemen. I think ultimately maybe that's where Kendall Jackson ends up. He's played a lot of edge rusher there at Buchholz High School. So to me, I get fired up about him if I'm Miami. Jason Taylor there. We know what they want to do on defense. They want to be aggressive. We saw what Ruben Bain was able to do as a freshman. I think that's a big pickup for Miami that kind of flew under the radar there on Saturday. What about you? What do you like?
I like Cohen Eccles. I know it hasn't happened yet. Texas A&M seems like they're playing a lot of defense. Mike Elko, first-year head coach, taking over for Jimbo Fisher. But Cohen Eccles, a guy out of Texas, somebody asked me last week, what's Auburn going to do on the offensive line? I love their class, but it was a valid question. They only have one commit. That was DeAndre Carter. They land a JUCO commit on the offensive line as well. If they can add Cohen Eccles, Drew, I love this kid. You talk about the track and field, shot put, disc background, a guy that can play multiple positions on the offensive line. Saw him at guard, saw him at tackle, also played a little bit of center as well. It's a nasty dude, number 9 interior offensive lineman. I would love that pickup for Auburn. Drew, the other one, I want to circle back to one prospect that you're pretty familiar with, but make some sense of Jonathan Eccles flipping from Tennessee to South Florida and your thoughts on that one overall.
Well, I've heard from someone close to the USF program that they're trying to finish with the number 1 ranked group of 5 recruiting class, and USF is playing in a bowl game. They went 6-6. It was a bit of a roller coaster ride of a season, but they are getting it done on the recruiting trail. I think sitting number 48 in the rankings as of this taping, a few other big fish out there. And remember, Golesh, he has experience recruiting in the SEC. Jonathan Eccles, he has been an interesting one. We were super high on him early on when he came out of high school or came out of Georgia before transferring into IMG Academy. We thought maybe he was an edge rusher. He wants to be a tight end. He committed to Tennessee when Golesh was there, and Golesh quietly behind the scenes worked on Eccles, eventually gets him in for an official visit and flips him from Tennessee, who I've been told wanted Jonathan Eccles. It wasn't like this was a case of them dropping him. Off the charts, he's great athletically. And Golesh making some noise. I want to see what they do in 2024 because I think he could be a really hot name if he's able to make back-to-back bowls after taking over for Jeff Scott there in Tampa.
A lot of defensive tape you saw from Jonathan Eccles, Drew. I think you and I, if we could have our pick, would put Jonathan Eccles on the defensive side of the ball as a 3-4 stand-up outside linebacker. It looks like he's going to play offense. I don't mind him going to South Florida. I think that's a good fit, maybe a good way to see the field early, build his confidence as well. All right, Drew, a loaded week as we inch forward to signing day, only 8 days away. You're in Spartanburg, South Carolina, as I alluded to. Any final thoughts before we get out of here today?
How crazy is this transfer portal stuff, man? I mean, it's just every time you look up, you're like, wait, this guy's in the portal. I went back to the class of 2021, Cooper. I was laying in my hotel room last night because a few names had entered the portal. If you go to 2021, right, the top 100 recruits in the state of Florida, according to the industry rankings, 54 of those guys have entered the transfer portal. And I think I'm missing a few. I didn't want to bust out the laptop and do too much research. I mean, just the player movement is at an all-time high. And out of that 100, I think there's only like 5 guys that I marked down as a for sure NFL draft pick. I mean, just wild times. And yes, that was the class coming out of the COVID pandemic and all that stuff. So coaches weren't out on the road. But man, just it's hard to keep track of all of it. Where different pieces are going.
Yeah, the thing that I kind of want to hit on before we get out of here is, I've been auditing my region, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee for the last week. And the one thing that kind of stuck out to me, you get to the lower level group of 5 commitments, really kind of in that 84 to 80 overall rating grade. Drew, I don't know about you. I've seen a lot of these guys that aren't committed And at this point in high school, you would think, all right, signing day is a week away. You'd think these guys would find a home by now, but you were wondering, you're seeing, okay, who is being indirectly impacted by this the most? It's those guys who now have to go JUCO or they have to go somewhere else because they are not signing a letter of intent straight out of college. It's the first time that my eyes were kind of open to it. Like, hey, man, these are some quality high school players that aren't going to have a home straight out of high school.
Yeah, they're going to either go FCS or that JUCO system is going to be even more loaded. No, I've noticed that as well. And I think a lot of kids just thought, hey, maybe the offers would be there. But as teams have gotten more active in the transfer portal, they want to take transfers. So there's a lot of kids that aren't going to have a seat when the music stops next week. And it's unfortunate to see. With that being said, any advice to those individuals? Go to the FCS, go to junior college if you can make that work, because you can always transfer up, right? They will find you. We used to say the NFL will find you. Well, the Power 5 programs will find you now. It doesn't matter. You just need to find a home, and you need to be able to play right away.
All right, Andrew Ivins, we appreciate you breaking it down from your hotel room somewhere in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And shout out to my nephew, Pete, one more time. Prestige Worldwide behind me. Hey, we're all about education here in the Petagna family. Guys, thank you for joining us. And be sure to keep it locked to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe as well. Andrew Ivins and we will be your guide the rest of the way. 8 days left. Everything recruiting. Guys, we appreciate you joining us. We will be back tomorrow at the same time, 5 o'clock Eastern time. For Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. Thanks for joining us.